Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to the Saturday evening film discussion on Talking Films Online. TFO began in June 2020 with Geeta's casual suggestion on Facebook during the lockdown of meeting online to discuss films. Since then, we haven't looked back, meeting every Saturday to discuss a pre-decided film with a small but engaged set of people for whom Saturday evening is earmarked for TFO. Last month, we celebrated the second anniversary of TFO with the second edition of a smartphone short film competition for college students and an online lecture series. Besides an active Facebook and WhatsApp group, TFO also runs a blog, talkingfilmsonline.wordpress.com, and a YouTube channel. For most of this month and the coming month, we are discussing documentary films. We have discussed Karan Bali's film An American in Madras, and Theodore Bhaskar had joined the discussion besides the filmmaker, followed by Swarnavel Ishwaran's film Nagapattinam Waves from the Deep. Babu Subramanian had initiated discussion, and Ishwaran too had joined us for the discussion. This week, almost fortuitously, this panel formed itself. As we had asked other filmmakers, we asked O.P. Srivastava to join, and I also asked him if he would suggest someone who could initiate discussion on his film. He suggested Girish Kasaravalli and G.S. Bhaskar. I was hesitant to ask Kasaravalli sir to be on the panel to discuss a film of which he is the subject. But when G.S. Bhaskar also said, that it would be good if Kasaravalli will join us, then I hesitantly asked him, and he very kindly agreed to my request. Who better than Madhava Prasad to talk of Kasaravalli's films and the milieu that has produced a filmmaker like him? Thank you very much, sir. We have been missing the conversations on cinema since you retired and hope to resume them soon. I now request Geeta to formally introduce all the four members of the panel today. Over to you, Geeta. Geeta, over to you.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. It is indeed an honor for me to introduce our distinguished panel. Girish Kasaravalli is one of the most celebrated filmmakers in India today, who in his 40-year career as a filmmaker has 14 feature films, 5 documentaries, and a television serial to his credit. His films have won a host of international and national awards, not to speak of numerous state awards. Not many directors in India have won the President's Golden Lotus Award 4 times, which Kasaravalli has. Ghata Shraddha, made in 1977, has been voted among the top 20 films ever made. Kasaravalli has also served on many international, national, and state juries. He is the recipient of the Padma Shri Award in 2011. M. Madhava Prasad, who will initiate the discussion today, recently retired as Professor of Cultural Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, India. He is the author of the landmark book, Ideology of the Hindi Film, a Historical Construction, published by Oxford University Press in 1998, and Cine Politics, Film Stars and Political Existence in South India, brought out by Orient Black Swan in 2014. He has written widely for journals of film studies, performance studies, linguistics, and cultural studies, and has published numerous translations of prose and poetry from Kannada into English. At present, he's investigating the history of language politics in India with a focus on the modernization of Indian vernaculars. He is also examining the role played by discourses of aspiration in Indian social life today through a reading of selected texts from contemporary Indian language cinemas. G.S. Bhaskar holds a postgraduate diploma in cinema from the most prestigious film school of India, the Film and Television Institute of India in Pune. He trained further under the renowned cinematographer A.K. Beer, beginning with Sir Richard Attenborough's magnum opus, Gandhi. He is a two-time winner of the Karnataka State Award for Best Cinematography in 1997 and 2012. He has been associated with prestigious projects of some of the finest filmmakers in the country, such as M.S. Satyu, Sai Paranjpe, Girish Karnad, B.V. Karan, Girish Kasaravalli, P. Sheshadri, and T.S. Nagabharna. Mr. Bhaskar has created a training facility in Bangalore called LACE Academy for Digital Cinema, so as to impart training to the next generation filmmakers and cinematographers. He has also served as the visiting faculty in some of the prestigious film schools of the country, such as FTII, SRFTI, Whistling Woods, and LV Prasad Academy. O.P. Srivastava, who is the filmmaker of the film we are discussing today, is a banker turned filmmaker. He is known for pioneering the use of technology in Indian banking. His journey in films began with the production of a fiction film, Missed Call, in 2015. The film went on to win 4 national and international awards, including the Best International Film Award at the Israel Film Festival 2008. It was the opening film at IFFI, Goa in 2006 and was also selected as India's official entry under Cinema du Monde at the Cannes Film Festival in 2007. His first feature documentary, Life in Metaphors, A Portrait of Girish Kasaravalli, won the National Award for the Best Biopic for 2015. In 2019, he published his first book, Life in Metaphors, Portraits of Girish Kasaravalli. His second book, Banking on Technology, The Changing Face of Indian Banking, was released in March 2020. His third book, Krishna Calling, Travelogue of a Teenager, was released in November 2021. He has also made award-winning documentaries on subjects like brain cancer, Alzheimer's, Yakshagana, and indie cinema. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Over to you, Madhava Prasad, for initiating the discussion.
Thank you, Geeta. This film was, I think, I'm so glad to be part of this because this is a really amazing film because it gave me a lot of new information very informative about Girish that I didn't know, and also it gave us glimpses into his private life and his thoughts on his own films as well as cinema as an art. And through the commentary given by various people, scholars, filmmakers, writers, a whole lot of people, we got to hear about the various dimensions of the art, Girish Kasaravalli's art as a cinema, as a filmmaker. I have, of course, followed Girish's cinema from the beginning. Ghantashraddha was one of the early films that we, as students of masters, in Bangalore University, we got introduced to the art house cinema, through various works, of course, of the world, as well as the, of all India origin. But also, in that moment, Girish's film came like our own filmmaker, joining the ranks of, the filmmakers of the world. So it was one of those exciting moments, and there was a lot of excitement in those days. As a journalist too, later on, I was witness to the kind of reception that early films of Girish had. I mean, there was a lot of debate generated by it. It's not that everybody loved it, but but what happened in those days was the amount of debate, people talking about these films, both in print as well as in coffee houses, etc. So the that moment of the 70s, that is where Girish begins his career, and also his own rather adventurous story about how he was in FTII, then it came out of FTII, a sort of didn't get a diploma and everything. So he was kind of also a figure, for the times, the 70s, who was, looking for rebels. He seemed to fit the bill. So it was slowly, as he began to make more films, and we watched them, and there was, it's only in time that one got to understand that there was, a certain philosophy of life, a certain outlook on life, which was governing his craft, his whole approach to filmmaking. This comes later, at least for me, and I believe for many people, because there were very diverse set of films, and as somebody said in the film, in this documentary, there is very much, in retrospect, one can see that this is the art of somebody who locates himself in a realist, humanist tradition, of which Satyajit Ray is one of the founding figures within the Indian context. So of course, we were never taught in those days much about the craft of filmmaking. We simply went and watched these films, discussed them, and had a sense that we were participating in the unfolding of something very significant. But it's only later that more in-depth sort of understanding of cinema as an art became possible for people like me. Although we took a lot of interest in it, and it is, in fact, it's from the later understanding. In fact, even as a journalist, one of the things, when we were interested in cinema, and we used to run a cinema page in Deccan Herald in those days, when we were looking around for things cinema related books, one of the books that I came across was in fact Girish's own book in Kannada, an introductory book on film theory. Of course, at that time I couldn't make sense of it because the language was very dense. The translation of film theory concept into Kannada, which was proved beyond my comprehension at that time, because we were simply entering into this discourse at that time without much idea. But in retrospect, after that, I got a sense of how finely crafted, how deliberate and how well plotted, planned, and meticulously sort of implemented his plan, cinema was. It was much later that, looking back and watching some of the films again, that one got that sense. And in particular, one of the things that was mentioned in this film, which rang true for me, was this comment people made, one or two commentators made, about his use of metaphor. The idea, even Girish himself makes an interesting remark there. And I think those of us in this conversation who are students of cinema, for us, I think it's interesting. It would be interesting for us to take this point from this film and actually explore what it means. The idea that metaphors, in fact, Girish says it, and then Anathamurthy also says it, and someone else, So it's a recurring idea, and actually, it is, I think, one of the fundamentals of film practice, as in serious film practice. Like, for instance, the neorealist cinema, I think, would similarly conform to this rule, which is that metaphors are not something added to the narrative, what you're showing, in order to sort of make sense of it. Metaphors, for instance, in popular cinema, you see metaphors like a pot is broken, or a lamp, a light goes out, those kind of things. Or if you have seen this recent film, Garuda Gamana, Vrishabhavahana, which is actually not a bad film. It's a good film. But in that film, if you've seen it, if you remember the dog that comes and goes very quickly, you'll get a sense of what it means, what the difference is between a metaphoricity that is immanent to or inherent to the diegetic process, without sticking out in your and sort of overstating the case, but something that's inherent in the visual flow, and is entirely immanent to and native to whatever is the filmic objects that we are seeing. It's yeah. I mean, I just wanted to highlight that as one of the things that Girish himself spelled it out very interestingly, and others also further elaborated on this. And of course, for me, one of the most amazing metaphors, if you like, is that pot in Manet. It's incredible, how something like that sort of worked in that film. I mean, that's one of the things I wanted to highlight as to get started off. And another thing I thought was very interesting in what Girish himself says in this film is there's this moment at the end when he says something very interesting, that he says that given a chance, I would edit my film today. I would edit my films, that is the films of the past, differently. And that's an interesting idea. And perhaps in this conversation we may get some more about that. And and immediately following on that comment, I mean, related to that comment, is his rather positive way in which he talks about digital. With the coming of digital, I think what he says, new possibilities have emerged, And that's what he, that's what enables this thought that you could have, he might, edit the films differently. And which is connected with also with that other point that was made earlier about how, by and large, Girish seems to shoot, know where the cuts will be, in the sense that most of the 90% of the cuts are are planned in advance. Anyway, I like this idea of, there is a certain amount of fetishization of celluloid that in our midst as we make this, well, we've already made the transition to digital more or less completely, except the director of Avatar, I can't remember his name. And some people like that who hold on to it. I mean, my own sense is that perhaps this openness to change, openness to new possibilities, is also made possible by the fact that the focus for a filmmaker like Girish is probably on the social critique. And it is as insofar as the technology enables that, and it doesn't come in the way, then there's no reason to shun it. And so, this is my sense. But I will stop here, and perhaps people can take up or these questions, or further introduce other ones, so that we can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for raising those very interesting points around the film. Would Bhaskar now want to come in? Would you want to respond or say something at this point, Bhaskar? G.S. Bhaskar, sir, would you like to come in now?
Yes, ma'am, I'm in.
Yeah. So would you like to say anything at this point in time?
No, I will pause this on. I'll wait for my next turn.
Okay. Girish Kasaravalli, sir, do you want to come in at this point?
I think he's off the line.
No, he's here. Yeah, he's very much here. Yeah.
I actually, I told you in the beginning that since it's a film about me, I wouldn't like to talk about me or my work. Let others react. So let others, express their views, and then probably I'll come in there.
Okay.
I think you should first ask OP Srivastava to talk about the film, and then probably we could read. It's a film. It's a discussion about the film, not about the person.
Okay. Sir, O.P. Srivastava, sir, would you like to speak now?
Yeah, I would briefly talk about the film. Mainly, as you might have known by now, I'm not a filmmaker, by career. I'm a banker. I spent about 30 odd years doing banking. But at some point in time in my life, when, I had reached the peak of my career, I decided that, the last thing which I wanted to do in my life was make films. So therefore, I started exploring films. And it so happened that I met Girish ji in one of the FTII workshops, which I attended in Goa. And there he had come to give a master class. And he was talking about the art and science of filmmaking. And after the lecture, he also showed his film, which is titled Dvipa. So after seeing this film and after listening to him for about 40-50 minutes, I got so mesmerized that it occurred to me that, suddenly I found what I was looking for. Suddenly I found an icon whom I wanted to emulate. Suddenly I realized that this is the kind of film, which was Deepa then, is what I would like to make. And this is also the kind of filmmaker, because when I saw him, when I met him, when I heard him, I realized that what a kind and humane person he was, and yet what an extraordinary filmmaker he was. So it just occurred to me that I should emulate not his kind of filmmaking only, but also Girish Kasaravalli as a human being. I was so touched by his modesty, his humbleness, his his honesty about everything. When I went and talked to him later on, he opened up so nicely and so quickly, and he replied to all my questions without keeping anything in between. So that's how that was my first introduction to Girish ji. And then I requested him that I was trying to learn filmmaking, and why don't you allow me to come and spend some time on your sets. So he was kind enough to permit me that. And for about 2.5 years, I kept on meeting him, and I kept on traveling with him wherever he went for his shooting. He was shooting his film on Anant Murthy and Adur Gopalakrishnan. So I used to go and sit on his sets and watch him work. And at the end of the day, using the same crew, which incidentally had Mr. Bhaskar also, I used to just sit and request the cinematographer and the sound designer to capture an interview, an impromptu interview with Girish sir. So I used to, at the end of the day, I used to collect all my questions as to whatever came to my mind and throw at Girish ji as to why you did this, what was this shot about, what is this mise-en-scène, why was this shot taken like this, why was zoom, why was close up and all that. So whatever came to my mind, every day at the end of the shooting, I used to sit with him and do that interview, and that interview was recorded. So all that footage for about 2.5 years remained with me. And slowly I started understanding the art and craft of filmmaking by watching those those clips and also interacting with Girish ji. So after 2.5 years, I decided, it occurred to me that now I was probably ready to make my first film. And what could be the easier way than this, putting all these footages which I had collected over a period of 2.5 years. So I researched a little more. I read everything, whatever is available about Girish ji. I saw all his films once again. I read everything which is available on net on Girish ji. I read all the books which have been written about Girish ji. I met all his friends, all his colleagues, all his some of his contemporaries, and also his cast and crew. So I met cinematographers like Ramchandra, Mr. Bhaskar, so on and so. I met other writers who have been working with him. I met his actors who have been working with him. And then I started recording their views about Girish ji. So this went on for about a year or so. And by third year or so, I was, I put together all that material, the footages which I had collected for last 3 years, and gave them a shape of a film. Basically, the idea was to understand two things. There were two objectives. One was that by doing this, interviews and these investigations sort of thing, I was trying to upgrade my understanding of filmmaking. I was trying to understand the art and craft of filmmaking, and who could be a better, person to teach you all these things than Girish Kasaravalli, who is the master of cinema, who is people call him the philosopher of cinema. So hearing the intricacies of filmmaking, the technique of filmmaking, and things like which Mr. Madhava mentioned, metaphor. He specializes in use of metaphors. I have never seen any Indian or any international filmmaker using metaphors so simply and so honestly and so cinematically. So this is the art of, and that's how, when I was about to give the title to my film, we went through various names and things like that. But then we decided, this man's life is surrounded by metaphors. Whatever he does it metaphorically also. And what is a metaphor? Metaphor is a technique which makes a visual getting universalized. For example, if there is a story which is happening in a village of Karnataka, how a person who's sitting in Italy or Germany or Switzerland gets the message, gets related to that, can understand the same emotions which are being expressed by a boy in Ghatashadra. How those are captured and how those emotions become universalized. It is done by using the art and the technique of metaphors. So this is something great which I learned from Girishji, and we decided to call our film Life in Metaphors, because his films are full of metaphors. And if you understand those metaphors, you get so much of insight into the story, into what he's trying to say, into the point which is being made, and into the human aspects of that story. So because at the human level, all of us, whether we are Chinese or we are Burmese or we are Pakistanis or we are Indians, we are all same. The emotions are the same. The layers within you, the human layers within you are the same. But how do you reach those layers? By telling a story of a person in Mumbai, and that story getting related to a person sitting in Switzerland. Yeah, how that happens is the art and science of metaphor, and that is what I learned from Girishji. So this is how the film came about. It is nothing but my exploration into Girishji's films. I was trying to understand, it's a biopic, no doubt about it, but I could have presented the biopic in a standard, traditional form where you tell, he was born here, he educated here, and he came out from FTII here and all that. I didn't do that because I explored his films and I wanted to understand the man behind those films. I wanted to understand the filmmaker, and I wanted to understand the man, the person behind this. And, somebody has said in my film also that Girish doesn't wear a mask. All of us, honestly speaking, hand on heart, we have a small amount of, degree may vary, but all of us wear masks when you appear in public. We try to highlight few things about us. We try to hide few things about us. But Girish is one such person who, as a filmmaker and as an individual, there is no distance between them. There is no mask which he wears. As a human being and as a filmmaker, he is just the same guy. Okay, so that is what, so I explored all that, his personality, his humanness, his shyness, his bit of an introvert nature, and his lack of marketing skill, which I have tried to capture in my film also, and his passion for, he goes through the minutest details of a human being. He goes through their sufferings. He goes through their situation. He's talked in my film. He's talked about this notion of alienation. When somebody is in Ghatashadra, when the lady is thrown out of the community, she is excommunicated, and the pain of being excommunicated is a horrible pain. It is much deeper and much more painful than, as Girishji has explained in the film, is much deeper than the wound of a stabbing. You can recover, as he said, you can recover the wound of a stab. But if you are told that you do not belong to one of us, which happens in one of his films called Gulabi Trakis, suddenly the whole village starts saying that, no, You are not one of us. You are out of us. That pain, that shock, that alienation is something which is extremely painful. And person like Girish ji has only been able to bring out that. It is there in most of his films. Dvipa, for example, which I got mesmerized, is a film which talked about this fight between development and preservation of environment. What is the meaning of development for us? We are all now talking about, we want progress, we want development, we want concrete jungles all around that. What is the price we are paying for that? We are reflecting on that today. Girish reflected on it 30 years back. Dvipa is about that. Dvipa is about subjugation of human pride, human existence. A small family staying in an isolated island is being forced to evict. They have been there for centuries. They are wedded to the jungle. Their life depends on the jungle. And because we want electricity in our houses, that tradition, that family, those roots are being destroyed by our greed. And this is what Dvipa is all about. So Dvipa is contextual today. It will remain contextual 10 years after. So what I'm trying to say is that all his films are not only, people say that films are rural based and rural areas and all that. They're based in 30s and 40s and 50s. But my point is they are relevant even today. All those issues are relevant even today. You know, these are contemporary issues and they make you reflect on those issues time and again whenever you watch those films. So it is contemporary. It is very important for people in today's, especially for the younger generation, to reflect on those issues and to introspect. As he said in my film also, his job is, as a filmmaker, is only to make you think. That's the main job of a filmmaker. We are not here to sermonize. We are not here to preach. We are not here to tell you a story. We are here to make you think and introspect and be disturbed about that subject, that point of view, and try and mull over it so that all of us bring out solutions which are much more humane rather than being driven by our artificial greed. Thank you. I think I have put my point across. If there is anything else, I'm happy to explain.
Thank you very much, sir, for elaborating on the circumstances which led to the making of this film. I must also share with you and put on record Samvarta Sahil, who has also joined us for the discussion today. He demanded that Girish Kasaravalli is too important a filmmaker, who deserves justice on our panel. So we must have a really good discussion today. He's too important a filmmaker to just casually talk about him through just one kind of perspective. So there are many people who have joined us who feel strongly about Girish Kasaravalli's films, people like Samvarta and people like Paniraj sir, they're all here. Anyone who is ready to respond, you're welcome. Please just unmute yourselves and let me know that you want to respond. There's a comment in the chat box, amazing explanation, Rupa Kangovi says. Anyone who wants to come in at this point, please unmute yourselves and let me know that you want to speak. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
please go ahead.
This is the first comment. Because Girish is so contemporary to us. I mean, Girish knows that for long 4 decades, we have been in journey with Girish, not only as a filmmaker, but he's also a film teacher and a film student. I mean, the way he attends all the workshops. He lectures on those workshops and he listens to those workshops. And so when this film was made, I was wondering, I mean, at this point, why? I mean, Girish's life is still there. But then I realized that he's 10 years older than me and he's 70 now. and kind of films he has made need that prospect and documentary. So because we were still thinking that he made a documentary on Anand Murthy, he made a documentary on Atul Gopal Krishnan, and it was kind of a journey. So when I was journey with him, you feel that he's young and he's with us, and all of a sudden somebody pays a tribute to him. I was surprised, and then I realized, okay, at one point of time, somebody has to talk and show the importance of Girish to the world. So that happened. So that was the first kind of impression I got when somebody said that, okay, a documentary on Girish is made.
Thank you.
Yeah, anyone else? While people collect their thoughts, I just want to say how much I enjoyed watching your film. In fact, immediately after watching your film, I went on to also watch two other documentaries made by Girish, one of which now I know is the context in which this itself came about, his documentary on Anand Murthy. I was watching it again. In fact, the bell tolling shot is there in both these films. So I can see the similarity between the two films. But also I went back to watch the Films Division documentary that Girish Kasaravalli made about the freedom struggle, Glowing Embers, I think. So the craft itself from 1986 to when Glowing Embers was made to the time of his film on Anand Murthy, one can see how the craft of documentary, the dramatization that has been introduced in the film on Anand Murthy, the way in which different perspectives on the subject, which again you two have brought in, getting people to talk about Kasaravalli and also about his films, in some ways juxtaposing the maker along with the film and then seeing how they throw light on each other, the filmmaker on the film and the film on the filmmaker. I think that has come out wonderfully well. And in a sense, watching all these four together for me was a very, very enriching and a learning experience about the craft of documentary itself. Bhaskar has put out a comment. Thank you immensely for taking Shri Girish Kasaravalli and his philosophy to more number of cineasts interested in meaningful cinema. Yes, thank you for the wonderful documentary. Sir Bhaskar, sir, do you want to say anything at this point, or we will wait for a while?
I come in now?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Vastavji, and good evening, Girish, sir. Nice to be on the panel here. My first question would be to Girish ji. This is about the lyrical humanism that all of us have been talking about. Andre Bazin had said about most of Rai's films, calling them as humanist. And at one point of time, Satyajit Ray himself said, I'm really tired of this word called humanism. Nobody speaks about the art and craft of filmmaking in my films. There's so much plenty of it. Girishji, would you also feel the same way when people talk about the humane aspect of your films?
Sir, Girish.
I understand why Roy has made that statement. Because what he says, not exact verbatim, rendering, but then what he says is, I am really sick of people seeing only humanism in my films, but my films has something more than that. it has rhythm, it has balance, it has compositions, it has, he goes on like that. That is, I don't know why I can imagine why he has said it, because I think he's also fed up with that. The people are talking only about the content and the politics, not about the art of filmmaking as such. You ask any filmmaker, I think all of them have this problem that people are only talking about the content and not about the actual film, the politics of the image, the construction of the image, and how the content explain is how that content comes across to you through their art. Nobody does that. That is one of the reasons why. See, that's the problem with Indian film analysis itself. Most of the time they only talk about the content and not about the this one itself, the art of reproduction itself. So that is one of the reasons, they don't see the difference between, various kinds of filmmaking that exist in India today. They would like to compare the films of Roy with that of Mrinal Sen, with that of Adur Gopal Krishnan, and all the three of them have different kinds of filmmaking altogether. So I think I'm no exception. I also sometimes get the feeling, when are they going to talk about my craft? When are they going to talk about my imaging itself? Yes, Bhaskar?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
I think let's do another film on that.
Yeah.
I just want to make one small correction, Wopi. In your film, I have been using extensively that one thing that bothers me is the alienation. I think term that I should have used the othering, the process of othering. I should have used the term, the process of othering, because the process of othering is becoming more and more dominant these days.
Correct. It's time for doing another film.
Okay, anyone else who wants to come in at this point? Please unmute yourself so that I know you want to speak. Geeta Dasgupta ji, Jayanto. Yeah, please go ahead. Jayanto, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. And I have to begin by saying that how much I admire the films of Sri Girish Kasaravalli, and I also enjoyed watching this documentary, which was very sensitively made, And unfortunately, my question, if you can at all call it a question, is also something which Mr. Kasaravalli warned us all about, that we don't ask questions on his craft. I also, unfortunately, will be asking some question on the content of it, but I think it is to deal with something which was uttered here by him. He just referred to the process of othering that he should have mentioned vis-a-vis the film of Mr. Srivastava. I came across somewhere, the mention of a book which was written by Ganesh Matkari, and it was titled The Seer of Contemporary History, Girish Kasaravalli and his cinema. And there, Mr. Kasaravalli, in that interview about that book, he does come about as to how he makes a distinction between a filmmaker who's essentially a storyteller, one who likes to tell a story, and an author who has a worldview, who has a central aspect to his personality and his worldview, and the films are built around to it. And he would like to be probably considered as the second more than the first, you know. And in the same context, and in the context of the process of othering, which he sees being, you know, prevalent in these times, I would like to say that how much does he see himself as a filmmaker who is the chronicler of his times, you know, and also as a filmmaker, does he have a prophetic function? Does he need to be able to be a prophet of our times, you know? I would love to hear his views on these two aspects. Thank you.
I would like to say that a filmmaker can be prophetic in his statements, but he will definitely make us think on the lines and the right lines. That is, I think, the purpose of any art. They won't give you answers, but they will make you think on the right thing, you know. They ask questions, and the questions are so pointed that the viewer or the reader is forced to unearth meanings or this one in the right direction. That's why, in that sense, they are prophetic. Prophetic not in the sense, you know, sitting on a high pedestal and giving sermons, but prophetic in the sense, you know, one who is going to construct the narrative in such a way that the viewer or the reader is, start questioning those lines, on those lines. And in that sense, you know, they are prophetic.
Okay. Anyone else? Tarakeshwar? Paniraj sir, yes, please go ahead.
Jayanto also asked you about how you respond to his chronicler of time. I mean, that's also an important aspect which should be discussed with respect to your films. He asked that relevant question is chronicler of time. How you chronicle from Gatashada to Ilirlare and Hogalare? How, I mean, do you see it as a chronicle of times so that the times are changing? And I am very interested that, see, now I think up late when we are discussing in Manipal, then the concept of othering has evolved and alienation, which I think is a concept which you evolved over through the film. So I am interested to know your views on chronicling and then realizing that throughout you are talking on othering.
Yeah, Ganesh Matkari's book talks about how all my films chronicle the the developments of the whole notion of social movements, starting from Gatashada till I think Kurma Avtara. He has analyzed all these films in detail. You know, there were some of the films talked about our obsession with development. Some of the films talked about our the way how we are swept away by the globalization. Some films talked about the rising fanaticism, rising communal fanaticism. So in that sense, my films, that's how Ganesh explains, my films chronicles the time, of the time.
Okay. Tarakeshwar, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. This is about not exactly Girish Kasaravalli's craft, but his theory of what his craft is. In that sense, he repeatedly says that cinema is a language, and he talks about finding the right metaphor and image That's the thing that he uses to describe his art, or craft, or science, whatever it is. If we take this metaphor of cinema as language, if I slightly extend it, language is very dynamic. It keeps on changing. So in that sense, and language itself is metaphorical in that sense. All words in our languages are metaphorical. But some of the metaphors have lost their value because of their repeated usage, and they have become a part of ordinary language. So it is the job of a master craftsman to create new metaphors. So in that sense, the language keeps on changing. So with this view, I would like to ask Girish whether he also feels the same, that he repeatedly says that there are good cinema and bad cinema. But the concept of good cinema and the concept of language, cinema as a language, might be changing. Does he agree to that? That it is the job not to find a metaphor to speak about certain things, but to create new metaphors so that people can look at the things that they have already looked at from a different perspective altogether with this new metaphor. Thank you.
See, cinema as opposed to literature, it's a performing arts in one sense. I don't know whether you agree with me or not. It's like a performing art, the way how ideas are performed in cinema. Of course, we don't perform, but then the way how images are created, that itself is a performance. And in that process, you constantly keep on modifying your idioms. You constantly keep on revisiting your, metaphors. Well, metaphor is not my argument. It's actually the this one coined by Anantamurthy in all his lectures. Whenever he speaks about me, he says, here is a filmmaker who talks about through metaphors. So we revisit, we reinvent, and we the practicing filmmakers, he keeps changing his idioms, he keeps changing his metaphors, he keeps changing his the mise-en-scène. So in that sense, if one gets stuck, then it's he's not. It obviously means his film also becomes stale. If that has happened in my film, in my case also, that is to be condemned, of course. But cinema as such has been reinventing itself. Look at the way how the digital cinema is using their approach to realism. They redefine the realism. The realism of earlier one is no longer the realism today. Abbas Kiarostami is on record saying that bicycle this is not realistic enough, within quotes, realistic enough. He redefined realism. And the post-Iranian cinema, they're further re-evaluated and further redefined realism once again. So it is a constant ongoing process. If you look at the history of cinema, the 40s British realism, the people who are practicing neorealism realized that was not enough. So they recoined it as neorealism. And neorealism was became a kind of a dominant approach till a certain time, and then the Iranian cinema and the Chinese fifth generation cinema redefined it. So that way, if you look at cinema, every 10 years or 15 years, they have been redefining their idiom, their mise-en-scène, their metaphors, their narration. So
thank you, sir.
Right.
Yeah, anyone else? Usha Iyer has also joined us today. Usha, would you like to come in?
You're talking about me?
Usha Iyer has joined us today. Usha, would you like to come in? Anyone else would like to comment? Rajan? Usha, okay. Okay, Usha says she's in a noisy place and cannot unmute herself. Okay. Just to continue with this idea of the metaphor, and is it that the metaphors, I mean, so far the discussion has been about the filmmaker as a creator of metaphors, but it's also about something, just taking off from where Paniraj and also Jayanto were asking, that is the filmmaker a chronicler of the times, or is it that as audience we keep going back to certain films, or certain or different generations of audience keep going back to certain films to find new meanings? For instance, Gulabi Takis is a film that I use for a variety of purposes in class, right from talking about what change in medium can be, to talking about the situation in contemporary Karnataka, or even talking about feminism and a relation with media. I mean, so it's a film that resonates at various levels. So in that sense, is it so much about the filmmaker consciously making these metaphors, because at some level this is the biographic as a mode also forces us to look at the filmmaker, the intention of the filmmaker, whereas there is so much that different kinds of audience, I think, go back to Girish Kasaravalli's films for. So any thoughts about that? Anyone on the panel, Madhava Prasad, Girish, O.P. Srivastava ji, anyone who would like to respond to what is in it that makes these films resonant even years after they are made? Madhava Prasad mentioned Mane. So a film that came in the context of the 80s, which is resonant even to the present day. So any thoughts on Girish Kasaravalli's films? If we don't take a biographical approach, which we have been doing so far, how would one understand, how would one respond to Kasaravalli's films? Madhava Prasad would like to respond, or anyone else? Yes,
well,
sir.
that's always a difficult question. How, certainly it's not, one should not say that it's, I mean, I think especially in the case of someone like Girish Kasaravalli, it's not personally, it's not coming out of his individual subjective experiences or anything like that, although that's obviously a very big part of how any filmmaker or artist would work. But certainly these are, of the times in a very strong sense. Their survival is a matter of how the questions raised there, the kind of characters created there resonate with later audiences, and I think because of the way that he manages to provide complex portraits of things which we are all familiar with. I think that's the, one of the ways in which I would understand. For instance, Kraurya for me is, the city, there is one aspect of it which is one should talk about. Although Girish doesn't stick with one kind of cinema all the time, but he has made some city films which are significant. And this Kraurya in particular, it really is one of the earliest and most films to show a city in such great detail. In the Indian Kannada context, especially. For instance, Thai Saheba. I'm talking about these films because these are some of the things I have watched over several times, and I, find them fascinating. The way that the questions, that come up there, and the sort of complexities of human relationships that this Thai Saheba, this woman is resolves in this amazingly creative way, and all that. I mean, they actually resonate, with anybody, in the sense these are human sort of universal kind of experiences, I would think. But at the same time, it's not some simplistic sort of portrayal of human values which are universal, etc. It's very concrete and very much tied to a place, and it has a texture. The films have texture in a way that very few films actually manage to achieve. And I think that that is what makes it visually appealing to me. All of these, the very dense and very rich texture of these films. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Geeta has raised her hand. Please go ahead, Geeta.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhila. I have a question for O.P. Srivastava. The making of a biopic involves, a lot of interactions with the subject and getting to know your subject very closely, and even admiring the subject, which is of course the reason that must have led you to make the film in the first place. Yet at the same time, a biopic also requires a critical balance, a distance, putting a critical distance requires critical balance, a distance, putting a critical distance. So, how did you go about doing that?
Very, very, very interesting question. But the answer is very simple. I had proximity to him when I was working with him. So I could be intimate with him. I could see him from a close shot, if I may. But, there is a physical distance. He stays in Bangalore and I stay in Mumbai. So whenever I used to come back, I am quite a distance away from him. And then I will have time to reflect upon him, independently. As you said, after having a critical, taking the distance and, staying away from him, gave me the opportunity to look at him and the material from a critical point of view also. It gave me the time and the, what should I say, the time to think about him critically also. When you are with him, you are not as thinking as critically as you should be. But when you are physically away from a person and you reflect upon what interaction you had with them 6 months back or 3 months back, about 12 months back, and you see those clips again and again, then you start getting insight. You start thinking critically about them. Why did he say that? Was he correct? Was he not correct? Is it the right perspective? Is he speaking the truth? Is he not speaking the truth? And that is what I think you mean by being critical. So I had the opportunity to look at him critically also. And that is how, I had tons and tons of material or footage, which I had collected in 2.5 years. And you only see 84 minutes of that. So that shows how much distillation or how much critical analysis has gone into looking at his films and looking at all those interviews and looking at the filmmaker also. I hope I'm making my point clear.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, anyone else would like to join the discussion now? Nandini, Rajan, Samvartha.
Hi.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, sir. Hello, Girish sir. Everyone. Hello. Yeah, I mean, just picking up from where what Paniraj sir was saying and Jayan sir was saying. At one point, Abhinava was bringing out this book on Gulabi Talkies, and I was one of the people who was supposed to write it, and of course, my laziness did not. There, actually, I was trying to make this argument that Gulabi Talkies is a kind of false documentary. So it's almost, chronicling it, but it's false. But then after a point, I was juggling with this. Is that a right terminology to use, false documentary? Then I thought, okay, it's metaphoric history or something. Or like, at that point of time, I was aspiring to be an academician and all of that. So I was very caught up. But when actually, Girish sir made this film on Anant Murthy and he called it a hypothesis. That's when actually Girish sir started appearing to me as not a more than chronicler, yes, at one level, but also a thinker, who is thinking through his camera. He's thinking through his cinema. So that actually made me reevaluate. My master's thesis was on Ghata Shraddha. I was looking at adaptation. So yeah, my question to OP sir is, Girish sir is thinking through his cinema, the making of cinema. I don't know, if we were to think through his cinema, then what is that actually? Because you have made this documentary, there is that attempt. So I would just like to actually see you actually thinking through his cinema too. Yeah, that's my request. It's not a question as such.
No, I understand your point of view.
Yeah.
See, I think I have a very simple answer for that. The way to think through his cinema, first of all, you have to look at his cinema. You have to understand his cinema. So what I did was I saw his films a number of times. And then I made him talk about those films. Yeah. So when he talks about those films, then the reason for making those films and his thinking behind that film starts coming out. So after watching that film, first of all, I made him talk about that film, which is in a general sense. What was that film about? What is he trying to convey and all that? Then I started digging further as to what made you make that film. At that point in time, what was happening in your life and what was the context of making your film? So his journey started from that point only when he took the decision to make that film. And then how he completed that journey of making the film and ending at the national award level. That entire journey was what I made him go through. On that gave me the entire spectrum of the perspective about that film and about the person and about his thinking behind that film. Am I making sense? Yeah. So that is the whole process I saw. I not only talked about the film, I started with the film, then I started digging deeper as to why did you take this person as this character? Why did you select this girl for this? what was her background, why did you make him the protagonist here, and where did you shoot it, why did you shoot it there, what was the thinking and what were the limitations there, so the whole process, genesis of the film, what inspired him to make Kurma Avatara, what made him think that there should be a film about that. So he tried to explain it to me that everybody knows Mahatma Gandhi as Mahatma Gandhi. But there is a person behind that. There is a human being behind that image called Mahatma Gandhi. So nobody has talked about that image. So he goes beyond the mask. He goes beyond the apparent image. And that's how I started understanding the person, and I started understanding his thinking as to why he makes those films and what makes him make those kind of films. So that was the analysis I did. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anyone else? I think I had asked Girish Kasaravalli sir this question earlier, and probably I can ask it again. In a way, just as one can plot a history of the milieu, the changing socio-political milieu of Karnataka through your films, it's also possible to plot the changing literary milieu through your films. From Navya to Bandaya to Dalita, Srivastava. So it's all there. The Kannada literary milieu is also coming through your films. Is it in a sense, just as you are dialoguing with society, with the discourses in society, is it also a dialogue with the literature of the times? Is your cinema a dialogue with the literature of the times? Because this is one aspect that O.P. Srivastava's film for me did not capture, but that's also because that was not his concern. That is not the film's concern. But do you think that's also something that your films are constantly doing? Kasaravalli sir.
See, what happens, even in literary movements, they are actually responding to. I'm on now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yes. Even in literature, people are responding to the changing times, and I'm responding to that change. So in that sense, it's we both, the literature as well as the films, are responding to the changing times only. Purely for literary movement's sake, I don't. That doesn't impress me much. When you talk about Bandaya, I understood where is the need for Dalit Bandaya literature to come up. And once I understood that, I didn't look at it as a mere literature. I looked at it as a reflection of the world outside, and I started responding to it. So the same is the case with globalization. Same is the case with growing. Impatience in the society. So it's finally boils down to the things that are happening in the society around us, between intrapersonal relationship between the society and the man. And literature is also doing it in its own way, and we are doing it in our own way in our films.
Yeah, anyone else?
Nikhila, one of the
yes, sir, please go ahead.
Which Manu has made in this film, I called it important because that Manu's part is so precise there. But he says one thing, that reality, realism in films. He raises the question of realism in films and how using metaphor, which is central to this film, using metaphor, Girish tries to look at another reality. I mean, reality is not one. Concrete in the sense that we tend to see a time or a space captured in one image as completely in itself. It's metaphysical and it doesn't change, and it's having only what it is seen. But there is use of metaphor shows you reality, other kind of reality, which is not concretely seen. By looking at concrete things, we say that this is the description and this is the. We limit the image by its concreteness. Use of metaphor breaks that and makes you to look at the reality from some other way, some other perspective, some other angle. So, rightly say that realism in Girish's film, if you find this metaphor, makes you look at another perspective of reality, which is not established, which is which overcomes the established views and try to look at it in some other way, so that you can be in dialogue with your time and you will be in dialogue with the happenings in society. That's an interesting point in use of metaphors in Girish's work, and way he uses camera and color to establish this metaphor lends a meaning to Manu's comment.
Anyone on the panel wants to respond to this? Okay.
I think what you were saying is correct. That metaphor gives a different meaning to what you are actually seeing. As my film, if you see the end of the film, it says metaphor is not only this and that. It is this and that and something else. So that's the actual meaning of metaphor.
Yeah, Jayanto had unmuted himself. Yes, please go ahead, Jayanto.
Once again, it's not a question. I just want to sort of make sure for myself that when I saw the film Dweep, I was blown away by the sheer lyricism of the film, but there is obviously something more there than lyricism. And the fact is, it's an island, and one is immediately reminded of John Donne's lines, that no man is an island. I mean, we in this times, we cannot be free. Anyone cannot be free from the relentless onslaught, relentless pursuit of quote unquote development or progress, And here, if we are not united in changing our life, I'm not saying that there is this advice there, but the suggestion is there to some extent that send not to ask, again the same poem by the same poet John Donne, send not to ask for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, So that was the kind of a message that I got, And would I be right in this assumption of mine that I just wanted to know?
Anyone on the panel would like to respond?
I think Girishji is responding.
Yeah, when I was planning this film, I didn't want it to be a film about for or against development. I wanted to understand this whole process of othering in this, globalization, in the in the process of, what is it, development and all that, and instead of merely remaining at a social comment, I also wanted to say, how does it affect the individuals? How does it affect the women member of the family? So in that sense, the canvas is slightly different from the kind of a social criticism that one sees on for or against development at all. I wanted to look at it from a different perspective altogether. There's in another article I have written about it. These three films are the three modes of resistance, Gandhian modes of resistance. Tai Saheba, Dvipa, and Hasina. And Tai Saheba, there she sacrifices and wins over. And here she negotiates and tries to win over the nature. And in Hasina, she wants to go for satyagraha and get the justice delivered. But in this process, this whole complex, it becomes much more of a complex analysis than just against development or pro-development or against development. And also not merely of, the empowering of women. No, it's not that simple. At least I didn't want it to be that simple, that unidimensional.
Okay, Swarnavel Ishwaran has joined us, sir. Would you like to, somebody has raised your hand, but I can't find. Swarnavel, would you like to come in? Would you like to say anything at this point?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nicola. And it was, wonderful, listening to all these people here. And I am mainly, I wanted to say hi to my batchmate, G.S. Bhaskar, the wonderful cinematographer who had a long collaboration with, Girish sir. And also he has worked with, Sai Paranpi, M.S. Satyu. And I just wanted, to, before coming, on the Zoom, I was also listening to it as you live streamed it through Facebook. Madhava Prasad sir, thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I think that when you spoke about the city space, in Mani and, Korea, I think it has relevance, that if we look at Girish sir's work, as most of us do, as continuing the legacy of, the great Satyajit Ray and realism. And as Girish spoke here, that realism itself, gets modified or reinvented, because of its ties with cinema and technology. So one could argue that, it pushes from what we saw Ray was doing in a city in, say, in Mahanagar. Money pushes that limit, to continue that, I could see the resonances in a recent film where we can, draw a line from Money onwards to Let in Tamil, where it is again about urban space and again about realism, but the way they differ as well, as Girish pointed out, that in Money you can see, that it's the space itself becomes, a very important, object, in the sense, object of inquiry. In Ray, it's more about the people within that space, isn't it? About employment. Whereas in Money, you can see, that claustrophobia comes in, and then you could argue that it prefigures our concerns with globalization. And Bangalore, being perhaps the most interesting place of all the metropolises in India to study that. And therefore, that continuity is there. And Mahanagar and Mani and Let for me also explains, the way we can see how realism does keep changing, in terms of the way you can plan and design, get at the mise-en-scène, through technology. That's one thing, I wanted to say. The other thing is, for me also, that, the other thing is about, what Girish just now spoke about, this trilogy of, women and, independence and Gandhian objectives and empowerment. There again, I think, it's also the beauty of, his own take on realism, I think, which allows multiple kind of interpretations. That because he just leaves it there, So it's not about, it's not reductive, it's not simplifying in his words. So that also, I think, speaks a lot that why realism as an aesthetic will always have its value. That even if technology may keep changing, as an aesthetic, it's a very powerful tool. And Girish sir's work is an exemplification of that. It emblematizes, that our ongoing, attraction towards realism. It's not just, restricted to sometimes the way we talk about invoking Bazan and talking about long takes. It moves much beyond that in terms of the possibilities of politics, through that, of multiple interpretation, of metaphors. So thank you. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Would anyone want to respond? Anyone on the panel? Madhava Prasad, Girish Kasaravalli sir, anyone? Prof. Srivastava?
No, I would just like to request all the participants to go and watch Girish Kasaravalli films, because I strongly believe that these are some gems which are lying in our backyard, and we just don't bother to look at those gems instead of looking for artistic films or meaningful cinema outside India. Such gems are, and these are I call them as pieces of heritage. So please go and find out this heritage which is there in your own compound, and try and absorb and enjoy these films which are still contemporary in today's world.
Anyone else? Would you like to come in? Usha madam? Okay. Any last comments by the panelists before we wind up? Would anyone want to say anything? Madhava Prasad, Girish Kasaravalli sir, Bhaskar sir, Prof. Srivastava, any last comments from you before we wind up the discussion?
Can I come in? I got two questions.
Yes, please.
One to Mr. Swarnaveleshwaran. He teaches in New York. Nice to see you, Mr. Ishwaran. I just wanted to know, how is Girish Kasaravalli's films reach to American students and cineas? What is their response to the films of Girish Kasaravalli? And has he been seen widely enough in the circles?
Personally speaking, I have screened, his works in what we have, a collective, a film collective, where on Thursdays we have a screening and discussion. It is open also to the larger community, faculty and, mostly graduate students. So that always has a, great response. I also screened as part of city, films in Rochester, Mane, of course, Mahanagar, and I screened Balu Mahendra's Vidu at the time. So that also had, great responses. And when I teach, Indian cinema classes, out of the 16 weeks I have in the semester, about 6 films I always have for regional films. So in that also, Girish's film is figured. So I also screened your work, Bhaskar, which you did for, Sai Paranpe, about migrants and workers, so it is always in circulation, that these are, great films, also because they address, as Nikhila pointed out, a certain time period in our history, both through, their invocation of language, literature, the socio-cultural milieu. They are very important works, of, one of the greatest living, film directors among us, Girish sir. And I'm also very happy, to say here that Bhaskar and I, were batchmates, and batch of Girish sir had just graduated. So constantly, we used to screen Avshes, his diploma of film, wonderfully, photographed by Jayangir Chaudhary. So the promises, of his diploma of film, he kept, throughout his career. So my heartfelt gratitude. So thank you, Bhaskar. Nice meeting you and talking to you. One of the main reasons, I joined today. Thank you. Of course, also to, listen to Girish sir and Madhava Prasad ji, Madhava Prasad sir, yes, one of our icons in film studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Noel, for that wonderful introduction to Girish, to American students. Yeah. And my next question is to Girish sir. Anantmurthy sir made a comment in his interview saying that probably Girish is the only filmmaker who was able to take his literary work beyond its reach. He widened the horizons of the subject. My question to Girish is, how did he kind of make this possible in his very first film, that he went beyond the scope of a writer like your Anantmurthy?
In fact, when I passed out of FGI, my concern was not literature, but cinema. I was all the time wondering how to bring this literary work into literature. So I would make a lot of changes so that the film becomes cinematic. So not a literary adaptation of a good literature. So in that process, there are two things, which I constantly kept in mind. One is how well the work lends itself to cinema, because cinema has its own potential, it has its own strength. And the second thing is that how can I intervene with the this literary work and bring out a kind of a certain this one which are my obsession, my this one. So these are the two things which are on which I started working when I pick up any story to adopt. I would work on these two elements: how well it lends itself to literature, to cinema. The second thing is how can I bring in my own interpretation, my own analysis of the world around me, not the literature, not the literary work, but the world around me. How can I bring those elements in this work of art? So that's what I did when I started working at many of the stories. I make a lot of changes. I bring in a lot of my insights, my arguments into the narrative.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Madhava Prasad sir, any closing comments?
No, I mean, yeah, it's been an enjoyable evening, and I'm glad I saw that film, and certainly I think I will go back and watch some of Girish's films again. So thank you for organizing this event.
Okay. If there are no more comments, then let me thank all the panelists, Madhava Prasad, Girish Kasaravalli, G.S. Bhaskar, and Srivastava for joining for this discussion. It's the spirit in which we are watching these documentary films is that we feel it is, I mean, particularly with a film made on Kasaravalli, I don't know how much of a milieu the present allows, films that, Girish Kasaravalli could make some 20 years ago or whatever. So probably it's an important time for us to revisit some of those films, bring them back into circulation in the form of discussions like this, We don't know whether such films can be made today, but certainly the discussion of these films and introduction of these films through our classes, through our discussions can certainly go on. So it was in that spirit we thought it will be interesting to discuss O.P. Srivastava's film on Kasaravalli. So that students, as Swarnavel was saying, students will feel that it's important to go back and watch some of these films. Thanks everyone for joining in the discussion today. We had quite a big group of people joining in the discussion, and many more are already watching it on Facebook. I think it's been very informative and very delightful evening for all of us to have listened to this galaxy of stalwarts speaking on Girish Kasaravalli and his films. Thank you all very much for joining today. And next Saturday, we meet again with the discussion of yet another film and yet another documentary film for the next couple of weeks at least. Thank you all and good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this, Nikhila.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.